Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Salas, Strategic Partnerships Manager at RepresentWomen. Welcome back. And for those of you joining for the first time, a very warm welcome to our inaugural Democracy Solution Summit, which brings together leaders in election administration, voting rights, and democracy reform who are working on solutions that will build a 21st century democracy. Thank you all so much for being here today. Yesterday, we honored the legacy of Lani Guinier, and today I'd like to honor yet another woman for whom there is no title venerable enough. Today, we celebrate the bicentennial of Harriet Tubman's birth, who, after risking her life again and again, leading enslaved people to the North, continued the struggle for the rights and dignity of Black women by helping found the National Association of Colored Women. The NACW sought to end racial violence, improve communities, and win the vote for women. And as Donna Brazil said in our introduction yesterday, we stand on so many great shoulders and so many who dare to make a difference. Fittingly, our third and final day of the Solution Summit is centered on fair representation. Today, we're going to talk about House expansion, redistricting, ranked choice voting, and the Fair Representation Act. And so today, we will hear about viable, scalable, and transformative solutions that we know successfully address the challenges to representation in our current system. The day will end with some actionable takeaways so that you all will know exactly how to help advance these solutions. Just to let you know, this event will be recorded and posted on our website afterwards, and there are closed captions available down there in your Zoom dashboard. So with that, to kick us off, I'd like to welcome Harvard professor and nonprofit leader Danielle Allen and Erin Velarde, founder of Vote Run Lead, to lay the foundation for day 3 with a discussion on the challenges and the opportunities for achieving fair representation. Danielle, let's start with you.
Thank you so much, Katie. And just so many thanks to you and Cynthia for pulling together this tremendous community, connecting and building a powerful community, building power, really working to deliver a full and fair democracy for all of us. And it's beautiful that you started off with Harriet Tubman. We do stand on the shoulders of giants, and we have work to advance now, but we can advance it because of the work of others before us. So I am Danielle Allen, and I am a Harvard professor. I also had the pleasure of being one of the co-chairs for the American Academy of Arts and Sciences Commission on the Future of the Practice of Democratic Citizenship. We released a report in 2020 called Our Common Purpose, which captures many of the reforms and solutions that you'll be talking about today. In addition to that, though, I'm a big believer in making real the things we all know are so important. So I spent the last 15 months running for governor in the state of Massachusetts. And in that regard, I've been really close to the question of what are the challenges and barriers to achieving fair representation. What motivated me to jump in was the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic and how it was so different for different communities. Some folks just got to sit on Zoom and ride it out, myself included, but for other people, working communities and communities of color, the immediate impact was just devastating in terms of family members lost and jobs lost and hunger. The difference was really profound. And I saw in my state a slowness in terms of our elected officials to respond to that and act appropriately. In other words, I didn't see fair representation. I didn't see the voices of people being so powerfully impacted there at the center of government. And if you ask the question of, how do you judge whether representation is working, it should be really basic. It's a question of, does our representative system deliver safety and happiness for all of us? And in addition to the facts of the pandemic, we have other obvious facts in Massachusetts that raise a real question there. The racial wealth gap, for example, in Boston is one that where median wealth for a white family is $250,000. For a Black family, it's $8. If you look at life expectancy for immigrant communities in New Bedford, the average life expectancy is 68. And in a comfortable suburb like Newton, it's 94. So we can see that our system is not delivering safety and happiness for everybody. And we can also see an absence of representation. We have a city, Brockton, where 68% of the residents are people of color, but 8% of the public officials are people of color. In our state legislature, it's still the case that women don't break 30% of the sitting members of our state legislature in Massachusetts. And so as I was campaigning, I was working really hard to make the point that we need voice and access for all. We need fair representation. And over again, I found myself talking to communities that experience that absence of voice, that absence of fair representation. And it produces a really deep sense of disaffection and disengagement. I was in Springfield talking to a church, Spring of Hope Church, an African-American community. We were talking about the hard problems we all need to solve together. Housing, for example, access to good jobs, access to quality health resources, and the basic social determinants of health. And we had a rousing conversation about all the good work to be done. And at the very end, an older gentleman stood up and said, well, yes, we've heard lots of people talk about these good ideas. People come here and talk about these ideas, but then none of them ever actually happen. And that's really hit home for me when he said that. And it just drove home to me how fundamental it is to get to a place where we can make sure we're getting full representation, fair representation across our political institutions. We know what the solutions are, but we're not able to deliver them because we don't have that full and fair representation. And what are the barriers? What are the hindrances? In Massachusetts, we are the only state in the country that makes candidates for statewide office compete to get their name on the ballot. It's the hardest ballot access process in the country. And over the course of our 250-year history, I think there's been one statewide state office holder of color. And so that's something that's got to change. And we also have campaign finance structures that really produce a powerful advantage to incumbents and don't open up the playing field, don't give people a chance to get in through public finance vehicles, for example, to compete and participate. So I could go on. There are lots of barriers, but the point I'm really trying to drive home is that there's really a basic connection. Our institutions should deliver safety and happiness for all of us. We can see where that's not happening. And wherever it's not happening, we can also see a pattern too, where we don't have fair representation. So nothing could be more important than finding the solutions that get all of our voices into the decision-making place so that policy happens with and through all of us and not just to us. That's the work that we have to do. And it's a real pleasure to be here with everybody today, kicking off today's conversation. It's a pleasure to hand it over to Erin Velarde, who I know is working incredibly hard on solutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danielle. I wouldn't mind if you would stay on for just a second. I almost have a follow-up question because we're going to talk a little bit about incumbency today. I know in the panels, and I think even when you're running there, for an open seat, there's still that sort of power of who is sort of the anointed one. And I know that there's dynamics like that in every state, but of course in Massachusetts. And I just want to thank you for running and shaking it up a little bit in what I think is a state that has a lot of, okay, it's their turn next. And if you wanted to, of like, there is power to talk about systemic solutions, but even just your race, I think, and stepping in helped to change the conversation. Do you think that's true?
I appreciate that. I sure hope so. And I think that there's a lot of work to do. I mean, it's just the fact that once somebody is in office, and this is true all over the country, they are in a position to fundraise and build up a war chest. And I think the other really important thing to say out loud is that in order to compete with that, you have to be able to take the time to jump in and do fundraising yourself directly. And so, not many people are in a position to do that. You have to be able to take time away from work, for example, go without a paycheck in order to do that fundraising work to try to catch up with an incumbent. So there are all kinds of ways in which the campaign finance system is a real gate that keeps new voices, non-traditional candidates out of the mix.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you so much for that. I'm Erin Velarde. I'm the founder and CEO of Vote, Run, Lead. We and win. And we are big fans of making sure that the environment that we are getting women to run in is actually really allows them to win, allows them to compete, allows them to do what Danielle just talked about, is not waste all of their time only talking to a small handful of runners, right? So what are some of those systems? What are some of the opportunities, I think, that I'm seeing across the country as we are seeing women in the Vote, Run, Lead community run from everything from county clerk, city council, all the way up. So I've spent years of being women run for office.
I think Erin may be having some internet connectivity issues, but hopefully she can hop back in and join us.
Do you see me?
Oh.
Here?
I could hear you for a second. Why don't you try again? Alrighty, Erin, well, maybe, oh, there you are. You're back.
Great. Okay. Sorry
Welcome
about
back.
that. All right. Hopefully. Oh, the joys of technology. So I have been doing this for 20 years. I love it. It's amazing work. I get to meet the most remarkable women. But I'm going to have to wait somewhere between 200 and 500 years if I want to see 51% women's representation. We are 51% of the population. So we need to not only be massively training and recruiting more women to run for office, giving them the skills they need to win, but we need to be looking at some of these systems. And right now, around fair representation, I do think there are great opportunities for 3 reasons. I think there is momentum around our democracy. Our democracy, and you'll hear it from all of our speakers today in the last few days, we know is under attack. And people, regular folks like you and me, are starting to understand that the systems we operate in, the rules of the game, the levers that we have to turn in government actually matter, and that they are being manipulated to keep us out. You know, whether that is voting rights or looking at how we are voting, to looking at some of these campaign finance, to looking at the size of our government, which we're going to talk about today. You know, some places, should we be representing millions and millions of people with just one person, right? So these are all things that we can talk about. And I think they are the sort of Gen Pop, everybody is actually starting to talk about our democracy. So what used to be a kind of nerdy topic is actually exciting. People are interested in it. You can talk about it at cocktail parties, like as you get out and get to do them more. So that makes me excited about this work about reforming our democracy. People understand redistricting. They're talking about it. So get out there and use your social media platforms, use your voice to be sharing the resources more widely, and get that out. The third piece I think is around incumbency. On top of some of the ways that we can weaken incumbency, there is just a general voter apathy towards incumbents. So it's an opportune time for more folks to run, and also an opportune time to weaken some of the structural things around incumbency. So I'm seeing a more of an appetite for newcomers, more of an appetite for crowded primaries, more of an appetite for the things that allow us to elect new folks. But the third thing I want to share that is really the most important opportunity to get us into this equitable democracy is that we have the models. So one of those models is here in New York City. We just did a grand experiment and used ranked choice voting as part of our primary system. Ranked choice voting was part of our primary system. We had 14 women, I think, in the 51-member city council. With retirements, it was going to get down to as low as 5. And with we have term limits here, it was going to get down to as low as 5 women. The ranked choice voting was used for the first time. On top of that, we do have some campaign finance reform. We have campaign matching that happens here. We also have a really robust community of women's groups who are training women and women of color to run for office. That's everybody from New American Leaders, Vote, Run, Lead. And we had a cultural campaign around this with a group called 21 for 21, whose goal was to actually get 21 women in the city council in the 2021 elections. Now, we all surpassed that. And the reason I believe that is true, because campaign finance was there before, because these groups have been around, is because the lever of change was RCV, was ranked choice voting. And this is anecdotal. This is what I've seen, is that it changed the equation for the women who wanted to run to actually jump in the race. Because now there were 3 or 4 folks who were running. Now the idea of fundraising didn't seem so daunting, right? They weren't just going up against, say, somebody in the party machine, which is still very strong in New York City. They weren't just going against an anointed one. Other people were jumping in, and the competition, the pool itself went, okay, I can run in this pool of people, right? Making those cost benefit analysis. And the results were astounding. I think it's now a 61% female majority city council for the first time in New York City's history. And it trends true with where we see ranked choice voting implemented in other cities across the country. And this is RepresentWomen's study as of last year, right? Like nearly half of the places, the municipal elections that use of all the municipal elections that use RCV, half end up being women. More people of color are getting elected. Maybe it's because more people of color and women are running. We don't know, but we're getting the exact result we want, right? Which is a more reflective and equitable democracy. And we're more likely to have those women actually be mayors of those city councils. So, we used it in New York City. Everybody said, the proponent, the opponents of it were like, oh, people aren't going to figure it out. It's too hard. You'll hear all of that. We had the highest voter turnout in the primaries that we had in 32 years. So all of those things mattered, having the campaign matching program, having these groups on the ground. But the true lever that I believe was that we were now running in an RCV primary. So I want to close there because I know I've got I think I went over by 2 minutes, but that this is a really opportune time to be lobbying, to be looking at ballot initiatives, to be talking to your city councils. Do they have local control? Who can help shape these things? And Represent Women has a ton of great resources to make sure that you have the tools to do that. So please get out there and start being a nerd for our democracy. Start talking about reform, start talking about systemic change, spread it everywhere you can. Thanks so much. And be sure to check out voterunlead.org. And you are the one we are waiting for if you want to run for office.
Thank you so much, Erin, and thank you so much, Danielle. We are really so lucky and so grateful to have you here with us. And Danielle, I really loved what you said about how representation is about so much more than fairness or about doing what's right. It's really about connection and safety and policies happening with us, not for us. I love that so much. And Erin, I love your mention of the beautiful recipe of ranked choice voting and public financing and empowering women candidates, like through the work of 21 and 21, to produce such beautiful results in New York City. I love that. Thank you both so, so much. Now we are going to transition into our next session, which is going to be an expert session about ranked choice voting, and a very warm welcome to ranked choice voting experts, Grace Ramsey, who is the co-director of Democracy Rising, Maine Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, and former Utah State Representative, Rebecca Chavez-Hauk. I will pass the mic over to you, Grace.
All right. Thank you so much, Katie, for that introduction. And I'm thrilled to be having this conversation. I'm so excited. So to dive in first, I think we can all acknowledge that working on these reforms isn't always the easiest thing to do. To convince people to really invest in our democracy is a big ask at times, but always worth it. And what keeps me going on the hard days are those moments when I've been talking to voters and I've seen them have that aha moment where they're like, I get it, this is a good idea, let's do it. So for my sake, because we are not having the best time in our democracy right now, I was wondering if you both could tell me what your aha moment was with ranked choice voting. Let's start with you, Secretary Bellows.
Thank you. And what an honor to be part of this amazing group talking about representation. So I'm Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows. I'm Maine's first female Secretary of State in 200 years. Maine's first Secretary of State elected by ranked choice voting. And on the wall behind me is a portrait of Jeanette Rankin, the first female member of Congress elected over 100 years ago before my election. So representation matters, and we need to continue to do more. My aha moment, Maine is a very purple state. We have Democrats, independents, Greens, Republicans, all running in races. And time after time, election after election, I, as a Democrat, found myself trying to decide, do I cast a vote for the independent or Democrat based on who can win or who I think would be the best candidate? And the challenge in a three-way or multi candidate race, which is something that we want to encourage, right? The more people run, the more opportunities there are for fair representation. But the challenge without ranked choice voting is that when you cast a vote for the person you like the most, you run the risk that the person you like the least gets elected. And so it transforms that voting decision from real, based on principle, to strategic. And so my aha moment was thinking, there has to be a better way, and having conversations with people. I was at the ACLU at the time when I first heard about ranked choice voting as executive director of the ACLU of Maine. And I thought this would allow true empowerment of the voters and would empower more people to run.
I needed that wonderful answer. We'll turn it over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Grace. Good to see you, Secretary Velos, and welcome to everyone who's on this call. And I'm hoping that what we share with you will be inspiring for you, as well as give you some great ideas of how you can move forward all these great reforms in your state. My aha moment came in a variety of opportunities. I had a constituent that reached out to me all the way back in 2008 to introduce me to the concept of instant runoff voting / ranked choice voting. I was a very brand new legislator, and I'm like, oh boy, this is really different. I don't even know where to start with this thing. But over the subsequent 5 to 6 years, I was working on various policies to take down barriers to voters' access to the ballot. I worked on election day voter registration. I worked on portability of voter registration. I worked on the expansion of use of voting centers on election day, and got a lot of great legislation passed. In 2016, sometimes what you see is you see these policy windows. They're kind of a perfect storm, an opening where the stars seem to align, and people's awareness of, you know, I'm not happy with the way things are right now. What would it be like if it were different? I felt that occurred in 2016 because a lot of people really weren't aligning with parties. They wanted to vote for candidates, and they wanted to support certain candidates, primarily in the presidential election. But I'd seen this trend tending over the previous years with municipal elections, local jurisdictional elections, of people just frustrated that my vote doesn't count. Why do I even, you know, I would go canvassing door to door, and people would say, I stopped voting a few years ago because it just doesn't matter. I cast my ballot and it just doesn't matter. And I wanted it to count. I wanted people to feel that their vote counted. And so I came back to that idea that that constituent brought to me 7 or 8 years earlier about instant runoff voting. And I thought, is it time? Are the people ready? Are they desirous of change? And that's where I saw happening after the 2016 election, where people were really focusing on, I want to support a candidate that I believe in. I'm not really caught up in what party whoever is in. I want to believe in somebody and I want to vote for them. And I wanted to build on that momentum, that desire, that interest that I saw in a critical mass of voters. And I felt maybe now's the time to try ranked choice voting here in Utah. And we'll talk about that journey a little bit later. But that was what my aha moment is just kind of seeing the stars align, primarily with voters' interests and desires to see the system change.
Let that be a lesson to everyone, that there are legislators where when you approach them with a policy idea, they will take it and run with it. What an awesome story. So actually that leads right into my next question. So both of your respective states took different paths to passing RCV in some form or another. So Maine passed a major ballot initiative in 2016. And in Utah, a pilot program was passed, I believe in 2018, that allowed cities to opt into using ranked choice voting. And so those are two pretty different ways to advance a policy. And I'm wondering what led you to make that decision? What made that the right fit for where you were? And then what were the kind of challenges and opportunities that that path presented for you? I think, Rebecca, if you would start on this one.
Certainly. So again, going to those policy windows and the stars aligning, in Utah, we are kind of a bit of a unicorn, an ideological unicorn when it comes to ranked choice voting, because the Republican Party here in this state had previously used instant runoff voting for their internal party elections at conventions in order to get primary candidates on their ballot, however was going to make their way through to the final ballot. They had been using IRV, they had been using instant runoff voting in the early 2000s. So I had a lot of GOP colleagues at the legislature who were very familiar with its use. And we were having discussions that year in 2017 about runoffs. There was a lot of frustration within the GOP, within the Republican legislators. And just for folks who may not know, Utah is a supermajority GOP state. So I had to set that as part of the framework. But they were very frustrated with plurality elections, where individuals were getting into office with 36, 37, 40% of the vote. And we're trying to figure out, okay, maybe we need to do runoff elections, that if a person doesn't get 32% or whatever they had a marker for, we should run runoff elections. My colleague, Representative Mark Roberts, who is a very, very conservative GOP legislator, had been trying to run legislation to pass instant runoff voting for about a couple of years at that point. Maybe in 2013, he had started trying to get us excited about instant runoff voting. And so he was saying, why are we looking at runoff elections when we could implement instant runoff voting or RCV? So that was in 2017. He and I started working together. I have probably one of the most liberal districts in the state. He has one of the most conservative districts in the state. And we were trying to come up with a technical solution to this plurality issue. It wasn't about ideology. It's about getting the consensus candidate through the race as the person that prevails. So that's where we started. We started with having those discussions. People were pushing back a little bit. We'll have some challenges with incumbents who don't like to change the way things are done because they're comfortable with running campaigns in a certain way. But we thought, well, why don't we try this with the municipal races? Because they're nonpartisan. We're not bringing ideology into this. Let's test it as a pilot program with the municipalities. Let the municipalities decide whether or not they want to use it or not. It's not forced upon them. And let's see what works and what doesn't work. So we started with that pilot program bill in 2018. It will sunset in 2026. So we have almost 10 years, 8 years of every other year municipal elections trying it out. And last year in 2021, here in Utah, we had 23 cities that opted in to try RCV. So that's the path we look, but it was trying to find what was of interest to people, the problem that they were trying to solve, and then offering a solution at the right time with the right individuals.
23, my goodness. Secretary Bello, so Maine took a different approach and went, I mean, I know there were bills in the legislature for years and years and years, but eventually a statewide initiative was the path that got it over the finish line. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
That's right. I think the lesson in Maine is, and activists know this, never give up. If at first you don't succeed, try again. And there were numerous bills blocked in the legislature, not supported by leadership, either in the legislature or the governor. And yet we knew we had broad bipartisan support across the state. And so in 2016, a committee came together with Democrats, Republicans, Independents. It was truly bipartisan to bring forward citizen-initiated legislation. So we circulated petitions, gathered signatures all across the state, and then ran a statewide ballot campaign, and were successful. Interestingly enough, I was elected that year to the state Senate for the first time, and ranked choice voting passed. A majority in the legislature were opposed to ranked choice voting. And so they were successful in overturning and delaying part of the law. And so we have in Maine a mechanism called a people's veto. And so we went to ballot again. And the people again gave a resounding support for ranked choice voting. So what that means in our state is we have ranked choice voting in all races at the primary level for state and federal races. And then in the general election, we have ranked choice voting for our federal races. So congressional candidates, including the US Senate and presidential races. Unfortunately, and this goes back to sometimes there's a difference between what the people want and what incumbent elected officials might want. So there was a move by some in the legislature. They asked for an opinion from the Supreme Judicial Court, which found that Maine's constitution prohibits ranked choice voting in a general election for state candidates. So strangely, we have ranked choice voting in the primary for everyone, but then in the general election, it's just for federal candidates. So our gubernatorial race and our state legislative races are not subject to ranked choice voting. Our municipal races, we have home rule, meaning the municipalities have a lot of independent political power. And so some of our municipalities, actually Portland was the first municipality in the state, it's our largest municipality. They moved forward ranked choice voting. And now we have 2 additional municipalities that have moved forward with efforts around ranked choice voting. So we're still pushing it at the municipal level, and there's still efforts in the legislature every year to try to bring forward a constitutional amendment to make ranked choice voting, universal for all the state and federal races through a constitutional amendment. But that's still a challenge. I saw a question in the chat. Have you seen people change their hearts and minds? We've certainly seen some people come around. recognizing the public support and recognizing how easy it is. I mean, in our lives, we rank things all the time, right? We rarely have binary choices. We have our first, second, and third choices in life. And so we have seen people come around, but not 2/3 of the legislature yet, but we'll get there.
Yes, we will. Well, that brings up an important point, right? Of winning on the ballot or passing the bill is the first step, right? As a voter education person for the last 8 years, I know that implementation is a really key part of this. You know, winning is one part, succeeding is different. And so I was wondering, Secretary Bellows, if you could share some of your experiences with implementing this and how to get the word out to voters and the more kind of technical aspects of it. But what has your experience been with the implementation?
So I'll start with the public education piece, because I think this is something we can all share in and is really important. And when I was on the committee for ranked choice voting on our first campaign in 2016, we did a series of ice cream socials across the state, because who doesn't love ice cream in Maine in the summertime? And we had multiple flavors and then ranked choice ballots for the ice cream flavors. And that was a great way for people to experience ranked choice voting in a lighthearted way. And that spread, right? It was something people could replicate and, you know, with friends and neighbors and was a great public education tool. We had some breweries do ranked choice voting ballots at the craft breweries across our state. So on that advocacy side, I think really engaging in robust public education so that there was clarity for everyone about what it means and what it would look like. Then now as Secretary of State, as Chief Elections Officer for the state, I think what's really important, one is ballot design. So we spent a lot of time, my predecessor and our professional election staff spent a lot of time on ballot design to make that very clear and easily understood by the public. So we've now had multiple ranked choice elections and no problems whatsoever in terms of spoiled ballots. You know, people understand how they're ranking, how to fill out those ballots. And then I think tabulation. And there are different schools of thoughts on this, but in Maine, we only tabulate once we have all of the ballots accumulated, so that, because if you're tabulating portions of ballots, you might have results that change over time. So we do centralized tabulation of all of the ballots when we have a ranked choice race. And I think that's been important. And then finally, transparency. So everything that we do in terms, every aspect of our elections is transparent, and every aspect of tabulation, including the ranked choice tabulation, is transparent. And when we had a particularly close congressional race, we actually had a close congressional race where the incumbent had the most votes in the first round, but not 50%. This was in a three-way race. And then when the votes were tallied through ranked choice voting, the Democrat Jared Golden won. And we did that in a transparent way. It was, you know, people could view it, they could see that process. And I think that really was important to public confidence in the ranked choice voting process.
Thank you so much. And then Rebecca, I know, 23 cities all across the state is a lot to manage. So that is also a major feat of voter education and kind of implementation work. Can you talk a little bit about your experience?
Certainly. I'll backtrack just a tad bit, because as you mentioned, you get the bill passed, you get people excited about it, but it takes elections officials to implement those elections. And we ran into the challenge that in Utah, the county clerks are the ones that are the local elections officials, and most of our cities contract with them to implement their elections. Well, we had the Clerks Association that was really adamantly opposed to RCV because it's a new change, and they were worried about all of the administrative and operational costs, et cetera. And so they were pushing back. And so we had, even in 2019, a few cities that were interested in trying RCV, but then when they went to their county clerk and said, we want to do RCV, and the county clerk would say, that's great, I'm not running your election. And so we ran into this real barrier here, and it just took some time to, this is where constituents, where the voters can really play a part. You have the voters pressing their city council members to try RCV. So then you have the council members going back to the clerk saying, I've got my voters that want this, and we're going to pass a resolution to establish ranked choice voting. Now, if you want to tell our mutual voters that you're just not going to administer it, then I'm putting that back on you. And so it was, that groundswell of constituent support to the cities to the counties. And then we had a few more county clerks this last time around say, okay, we'll give it a try. And we kept telling them, this is why it's a pilot. This is, using things as a pilot is where we test things and see if there are improvements that need to be made. But let's give it a try. And your constituents want to try this out. So that is, kind of one of the most important things is you have to be ready to have those conversations and to bring a groundswell of support from constituencies and from decision makers upward, because sometimes it's even just the elections officials that are a little concerned, and rightly so, understandably. But we need to convince them and provide resources to them. There's so many great organizations. In the interest of full disclosure, I serve on the board of the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center, but we provide a lot of resourcing and technical assistance to localities to help them learn how to implement ranked choice voting elections. So there was Fair Vote. There were so many organizations that came with resources to bear, the education campaigns. And then Representative Roberts, his last year in office, was able to garner a few $100,000 worth of funding from state funding to work with the state elections officials to come up with some campaign materials, videos, webinars, et cetera, where they could inform voters how to utilize ranked choice voting. So it is really this kind of convening of supporters, but it starts with the constituents putting pressure on their elected officials.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, we have a couple minutes left, so I want to definitely end it on a positive note. So both of you are coming off of election cycles and going right back into election cycles with these systems, but I'm wondering if you could share either a story or something that you've drawn some hope from, something where you said this was worth it. It's hard work, but it's worth it. Secretary Bellows, would you kick us off?
So, I was reflecting on how daunting it is for people to even consider running sometimes. There are, incumbency challenges when you're challenging an incumbent. In 2014, I ran unsuccessfully against US Senator Susan Collins, for example. But there are also other barriers. Sometimes there seems like there's a party favorite, or sometimes somebody enters the race that has a significant amount of money. And ranked choice voting undermines the power of incumbency and the power of money. It levels the playing field. And I think when I reflect on my race for Secretary of State, I was the last person to enter the race. I was the only female to enter the race. Keep in mind, we hadn't had a female in 200 years. And conventional wisdom was that I was a long shot. In fact, dear friends discouraged me from running. They said, why would you want to give up your chairmanship in the state Senate to lose this race? But ranked choice voting gave me some hope. It gave me hope that people could cast their ballots based on who they thought would be best and not engage in strategic voting. And when I was making those calls, Maine's legislature elects a Secretary of State, which is a little bit odd. But when I was making the calls to legislators, I would say, oh, if I'm not your first choice, how about your second choice? And so it also increased, I think, civility in that race and in other races, because when you're trying to get your opponent's second choice votes, it's certainly much less of their incentives to run a really positive issues-based principled campaign, which is the way it should be anyway. So I think what gives me hope is, in Maine, we've got a combination of things. We have public financing for the state legislature, we have term limits, and we have ranked choice voting, and we have same-day voter registration. This is something that Rebecca and I share in common. We both ran election day registration campaigns in our states. But we're seeing, we have one of the youngest speakers of the House in the country, an out gay man, the first out gay speaker of the House in Maine. Our whip is the first African-American whip in Maine. Someday I hope we see the last of the firsts. But ranked choice voting, some of the other reforms we're talking about, the Solutions Summit, it's increasing representation. It's getting us to that day where we see the last of the firsts.
As goes Maine, so goes the nation. Rebecca, do you want to close us out?
Certainly, a couple of points. One thing that I just take such great joy in, and Salt Lake City is more progressive than the rest of Utah by note, but we now have through our city council with this last ranked choice voting election, a majority LGBTQIA, as well as a majority people of color city council. And that is just so promising, so much energy and so much lived experience that will really drive some great policy decisions for Salt Lake City. And then speaking to what Secretary Bellows started us out with in terms of how people normally vote when they're not giving this option, where you're trying to figure out, okay, I really like this person, but they just don't have a chance on winning. So I'm going to throw this vote to this other person, even though they're not my favorite. When we did polling after talking to voters who participated in this last pilot in Utah with the 20, actually it was 20 cities that eventually participated, 60% of those voters were more likely to vote for their first choice. 60% were more likely to vote for their first choice versus, trying to figure out, okay, I better not throw my vote away. And isn't that what it's all about? Allowing voters to have their choice, their first choice, and feel comfortable and feel like they're really participating by casting that first choice ballot. And then they can rank the others, knowing that maybe there's others they're comfortable with. So I think that was exemplary of what we're trying to achieve with this option.
Well, this has been an absolute thrill for me. Thank you both for joining me. I hope folks got as much as I got out of this discussion, and I will be passing it back over to Katie. Thanks again.
Thank all of you so much for that conversation. There's so much we can learn from you and from your experience and your wisdom. And again, this theme of these positive spillover effects, these reinforcing effects of having multiple solutions working together, it keeps coming up. So thank you so much. So now we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll be joined by Katie Fahey, Michelle Whitaker, Angela Cowders, and Rena Shaw for a discussion on redistricting, the Fair Representation Act, and House expansion. So we will be back here in about 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, and welcome to Experts Katie Fahey, the co-founder and executive director of The People, Michelle Whitaker, messaging and campaign specialist, and Angela Cowders, director of government affairs at Fairvote. This conversation will be moderated by Rena Shaw, political consultant and CEO of Relaxed Strategies. Rena, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you today. I'm so privileged and honored to be a longtime board member of Represent Women, as well as Vote Run Lead. I am, again, honored to be doing this work and to be gathering with you all today. because you're here, it means you care about our democracy. Right away, I want to thank you all off the bat for just being here today. I think part of being in the democracy reform space is that you hear a great deal of frustration. It's not always positive, but this summit, these 3 days of inspiration, of action, of solutions talk, this is what I hope has fed your soul and encourages you to share with your friends and neighbors about what we can actually do to fix our democracy, to get it to a place where all of us feel more proud and feel as if we're doing more for our country. I think that's what's at the core of everything all of us do when you're in this space. So I'm joined today by Michelle and Katie and Angela, experts in the field. Ladies, thank you so much for being here. And we have 20 minutes, so I want to just jump right into it and ask you the questions that are the most important. And I know our audience wants to hear from you as well, sharing your expertise on the nitty-gritty. As you know, this session is titled one where we'll talk about solutions focused on the Fair Representation Act, fair representation voting, redistricting, my personal favorite, which is eliminating gerrymandering, and expansion of the House. These are, again, solutions to the representation crisis in our current system. Our main objective here today with this expert solution session is for all of you listening out there to increase your awareness of viable, scalable, and transformative solutions that remedy, again, the issues in our current system. So thanks again for being here. I encourage everybody to follow our panelists online and continue the conversation online because we just have a short period of time now. So I'll jump right into it with Katie. If you will, Katie, please share your story related to getting Michigan to adopt an independent citizens redistricting commission. To that end, would love to hear a little bit more from you on how also other states could successfully implement IRCs, independent redistricting commissions. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I certainly didn't start off as an expert. My journey started in 2016 when I made a Facebook post saying, hey, I want to end gerrymandering in Michigan. If you want to help, let me know. Smiley face emoji. At the time, I did not realize it would lead to amending our state constitution. I just knew that in Michigan, a lot of things weren't going right and the will of the people was being undermined. We had the Flint water crisis, a lot of bills that were being passed that directly reduced voters' power. But I also knew that we had the citizen-led ballot initiative process, where if a group of citizens could come together and write constitutional language, gather a bunch of signatures for the 2018 election, it was 315,654 registered Michigan voter signatures in 180 days. And we could actually have the people of our state vote directly on whether they wanted to amend our constitution to have citizens and everyday people drawing these district lines instead of politicians, creating an independent citizens redistricting commission. So quickly, I actually saw that I wasn't the only one who felt that way. There were actually thousands of people in Michigan who had cared about redistricting reform and gerrymandering for a really long time, frustrated about it. Kind of like me, they didn't actually know exactly what we could do about it. After a bunch of people started responding to my Facebook post, I literally had to Google, hey, how do you end gerrymandering? Because I wasn't really sure. And I wasn't sure of the best practices, but we slowly started to learn together. We toured around our state, engaging thousands of people, asking them what they felt like would make fair representation, who should draw these lines, what should they look like, what should their background be, their qualifications, what is the process for actually drawing those lines? What defines a fair district? What do we want our representation to look like? Is it based off of geography, based off of community interest? Is it based off of an algorithm? Like, what do we want? And lastly, what do we want the overall process to look like? Do we want a bunch of people to be able to participate? Do we want the data made available for free? After the hard work of literally thousands, we have our Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission. It passed in 2018. And they actually recently passed in January our first set of fair maps in about 50 years here in Michigan, actually representative of the will of the people for the first time in decades. And what's really exciting about that is because we put it in our Constitution, every 10 years when the redistricting process happens again and again, we will actually have this process be followed again and again, guaranteeing that generations of voters will now be able to participate in that.
which is very exciting. There are a handful of other states that do also have independent redistricting commissions. When we talk about redistricting commissions, there's really, for your state elections and then federal elections, there's 3 sets of lines we're talking about. Your congressional members, state senators don't count because they don't have districts. It's just your whole state as their district. But your congressional members, and then your state house, your state senate, or whatever the equivalent name is. I know some states don't call them that. In Michigan, we do call them our house and senate. And so there's some states that have their congressional maps change, and some that have independent commissions for just their state legislatures. But this includes California, Washington, Idaho, Colorado, Utah, some that have politician commissions, including New Jersey, Ohio. Virginia has kind of a hybrid with citizens and politicians. Iowa is similar. Missouri, similar, Pennsylvania, and then Alaska and Hawaii have independent redistricting commissions too. So this idea is really getting popular. What's really exciting to see is just how many states, how many people in states across the country are interested in this. There's been over 13, there's 13 other states who are working on trying to do an independent commission through the ballot initiative process. And even if you don't have the ballot initiative process, Virginia didn't have the ballot initiative process either, and that was really the will of the voters going and talking and demanding that they get fair maps. There's also fights happening in the courts, like in North Carolina and Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, which is very exciting too. And all of those are citizen-led, and the only reason that things are being paid attention or that politicians are feeling this pressure is because people are showing up and saying, we want fair districts. We want our districts to be based off of how the voters actually vote, not based off of political games or party gamemanship.
That's right. And I live in Virginia right now. And I was encouraged by, just again, the will of the people, a feeling that this just makes sense. We don't want it to be at the whim of a political party or group of people, right? So this is great to hear the nuts and bolts on that from you, Katie. Thank you. Michelle, moving on to you. You have a lot of experience, I know that personally, with ranked choice voting and multi-winner districts. If you could give us an overview, please, of the movement for ranked choice voting and how single and multi-winner ranked choice voting are connected. I think that's a question I often get from folks is, break down ranked choice voting for me real quick. They say to me, Rena, please break it down. I'm like, okay, hold on. How do I weave in some of this multi-winner district stuff and really make it easy to understand? If you could please share that with us, Michelle, we'd so appreciate it.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be with you. This has been really, as others have echoed, a really amazing 3-day summit. And I've been able to, I was here on the first day, popped in on the second day, and obviously here speaking, but it's really amazing to see so many advocates, women leaders across the country speaking, folks who want to just engage more on these issues. And so, Rena, to your question about like, what is ranked choice voting? Why does this matter? It's because representation matters and voting matters for all of us. And we've done a lot of work since this country was founded. There's been a lot of work that has to do constantly happen to expand democracy. When this country was founded, I was not in this panelist. We weren't allowed to vote, right? Go even further, just a few decades ago, my mom, who's a DC resident, didn't have representation in Congress because they didn't do that because of home rule and other legislation, and didn't treat DC residents and other territories equally in our government. And that's still the case for many, and that's why statehood matters. So I talk about these issues because ranked choice voting can seem like a process piece of like, how do we fix this one part, but it goes to that ultimate goal of representation. How do we make our government look more like our communities? How do we see ourselves in leadership and see ourselves in that in government and able to lead? And we need reforms like ranked choice voting because, as earlier panels have shared, ranked choice voting is making a difference. It's electing more women. It's electing more people of color. We're seeing majority people of color on councils now, and that's not something that we've seen ever in some places, right? So this is all about representation. This is all about making our vote count. And when we talk about the mechanics of ranked choice voting, I like to share really simply that like it's about being able to express your choices. Right now in our winner take all system, it's very limited. It's like you have to just pick one and hope that you pick the one that's going to win and represent your issues. But we see too often that is not a successful way for us to actually have representation, fair representation, and communities that are represented in local government and federal government. When we look at situations where you have multiple members that could be on a legislative body like Congress or even city and state legislatures, what we see when we have multiple candidates running, and we want lots of folks to run and bring ideas so that we have those ideas represented on the council, like-minded voters often split the vote among like-minded candidates. And when that happens, then most likely you're not going to get folks who you want to have on council in Congress who are really representing your issues. But what ranked choice voting does is let you rank your candidates in order of preference, your first choice, second choice, and so on. And the way we tabulate that is based on counting all those first choices. And in a single winner race, if someone garners more than 50% of the vote, they win, just like you would in any other race. But if nobody does, that's when an instant runoff, as it was called earlier, kicks in, and we eliminate the candidate in last place, and then the voters who rank that candidate as their first choice now have their second choice considered. And you do that until you have a candidate who is garnering that broad support and represents really the will of the people. And when you're talking about multi-winner, the same thing, I always tell people, how do you vote? It's the same way as in single winner. You're still ranking your preferences. And then what we do is we have a way that we make sure the tabulation also accounts for that fair representation piece. And so there's a threshold that you need to in order to win. And so that threshold is based on the number of seats that are available. There's lots of information on fairvote.org and Represent Women as well about how that threshold works, but understanding that that threshold is similar to the single winner version as well. Like you need 50% to win in a one-on-one contest or a single seat contest. You'll need whatever percentage for the number of seats that are available in a multi-winner contest. But the whole goal is about achieving representation, achieving the ability for our voices to count. And I've gotten into this work, and I'm the statewide coordinator of Ranked Choice Voting Maryland. I got into this work because we had recent elections in my county, Montgomery County, where we had 33 candidates running for some at-large seats. So four seats available, lots of candidates running. And people were very frustrated about the outcome of that in terms of how they were picking the choices and who was winning with, a fraction of the vote. We had the same thing happen with gubernatorial races in Maryland, again, with multiple candidates running, great candidates, but people winning with a fraction of the vote. People have this angst and they don't understand it all the time, but it's about, I want my vote to count. I want somebody who we elect in the primary or general election who reflects that will, and that's one way that we get to it. And I know Ashley's going to talk more about this when we talk about, or Angela's going to talk more about the pieces of the Fair Representation Act, but I think what's great about the Fair Representation Act is it combines the discussion on redistricting and taking the hands of the politicians' hands out of drawing our district lines, and also combines the ranked choice voting to really make sure that we're both creating a way for people to have a stronger voice in their elections. And it's the blueprint that we have for representative democracy. That's where we really get to the structure of saying, like, if we want reflective democracy at Congress, and if we want it at the local level, these are the ways that we do it. And it's by combining these reforms to create really powerful aspects in our world.
And I really love that piece about people feeling like they have a stronger voice. That's huge. This is one such way to get there. In fact, it's the best way to get there right now. To me, it's the most sensical. Again, these reforms, these systemic reforms really make sense. And I hope audience, you're hearing that. Angela, last but certainly not least, you are our Fair Representation Act expert here. So if you would please share with us about what's included in that legislation and how it would benefit us in our current system as well as the FRA, the Fair Representation Act's prospects in Congress as well.
Sure. I just want to thank Represent Women again for throwing this summit. It's actually just really refreshing amidst the political climate to have a group of, political activists, organizers, leaders kind of come together and really just talk through solutions when Sometimes it is far too easy to just talk about the problems. So, really appreciate that. And for the organization, it's been really incredible to have everyone here. So the Fair Representation Act is introduced by Congressman Don Beyer from Virginia. The idea is exactly as Michelle kind of laid out, to go through like the various components of the legislation. It includes independent redistricting commissions. It creates multi-member districts for elections to the House of Representatives, and it requires the use of ranked choice voting. And we've talked about some of those various benefits, but the key behind in marrying these various components is that it reduces polarization and partisanship, and all the benefits of ranked choice voting by incentivizing elected representatives to sort of appeal to a broader range of voters, particularly if you're appealing to their second choice, or be seeing someone else's getting into their sphere of interest. And then ranked choice voting in the multi seat districts would kind of reduce the number of safe seat districts. Like, I've worked on numerous campaigns, including congressional committees, where I could do the math today and tell you exactly by number. Like, I know exactly how many seats at minimum the Republicans are going to hold, and how many seats the Democrats are going to hold. And then there's very small smattering that are actually like up for grabs in any given year. And so, it would really actually increase like the political competition in like the system as it's currently devised. And then, obviously with more proportional representation, like you really see, not just within political parties within states, but the election of more women, the election of more, minorities, having a more, collective democracy, and making sure that it does really, the democracy does represent this country. And so, it is, I've worked within or for Congress on and off for like 20 years now. I've seen both the House and the Senate in the majority and the minority. And I can tell you, like, aspirational pieces of legislation are incredibly critical to have, because they map out like where the vision for where you can see things to go. Realistically, how Congress moves is at a slower pace. It is easier sometimes to break things up, to get people to digest and get familiarized and really get things into the bloodstream and popularize it. And that's kind of what, success means on the Hill these days, is you are, framing an idea, you're introducing it to new people, and then you kind of come back and you marry it. And, politics is all about like timing and opportunity. We all thought like there was going to be an enormous opportunity and call, frankly, a requirement to act after January 6th. And I think both parties, at least everyone that I've ever worked with, was like, yeah, I really can't believe we didn't do anything on that. So that just is kind of a testament to the state of affairs we're in. Now you are seeing, some progress, right? Like you're seeing people being open to interest, to hearing about this. Obviously, you're seeing this growth at the state level. All of that helps with congressional impact. The more like this bubbles up and it impacts their constituents, members of Congress like wake up. And so like all of that is important and is a really part of like the program we're implementing in our kind of outreach strategy. But really like, success for us is moving ranked choice voting forward, like trying to make sure that there's funding for states, trying to make sure we can brief and educate new members that have never heard about it before. That's a success, because then when I go back, whenever the opportunity is ripe, I can talk about more things. I think there's a lot of discussion, particularly in this, redistricting year, of independent commissions. And so I think, obviously now is the time, and I think everyone is again yet seeing the data points for why these are so critically necessary. And so, it's good to have that metric. So, I think like we move the ball forward by continuing the conversation.
Excellent points. And I think the appetite for folks out there who have wanted a more inclusive and reflective democracy, the appetite for ranked choice voting and independent redistricting commissions, when we marry the two, get them excited, at least wet their palates with it, this is part of the play. It's a long-term play. And I, as a former political operative, I must say, you know, when I think about how to express the passion behind these reforms and really distilling them down to folks who are not very politically active, I try to pepper with things such as what happened in Virginia. You know, voting yes on Amendment 1 meant that you're not giving in to political whims anymore. You want fair maps. You want them drawn by people who are not, again, going to be carried off by partisan whims. But also a second part of it was at the Republican convention, ranked choice voting was used. And I know in the previous session, that was interesting tidbit to me that I didn't know in Utah that's RCV had been used in their conventions first, in the Republican conventions. And maybe that's another way to whet the appetite. So I've really learned and gleaned a great deal from you three individuals, our experts, our ladies in the know. Again, please, audience, follow these remarkable experts we have here, and how refreshing to hear about solutions. Thank you for sharing yourselves today and your minds. I know we're short on time now. We've gone a little bit over, but I just want to give each of the three of you just one moment to say a parting word to our audience, because you've taken your time to be here with us today. What would you like to share before we go? Let's start with you, Katie.
Sure, yeah. You know, I really think a lot about, even when it comes to redistricting, once you pass and create an independent citizen redistricting commission, the only way that that commission is successful is if we're still paying attention. If we're actually going and showing up and saying, hey, here is how I want my district to look. Here's the community or the aspects of my district that I think are important or have been ignored the previous 10 years. And just remembering that being an active citizen doesn't stop just after a bill passes, but that it's something that hopefully we can transform our democracy to be participating in more easily and more readily all of the time. And even though redistricting also only happens once every 10 years, these elections, once you have fair districts, it should have an opportunity to actually be able to elect the people that you want to. And if you want change, be able to elect people. So just never forget that your role, whether it's signing a petition, starting one, showing up to a hearing, like all of that matters. And literally, if we don't show up, we can't have this fair democracy.
Thank you, Katie. Michelle, what about you?
I'll echo Katie and say, like, democracy matters, and it happens outside of just what we do in elections. It's what we do to make our elections work. It's what we do when we are present at city council meetings, county council meetings, go to hearings, wherever they may be. And so I hope that everyone will get involved and see what opportunities there are to bring ranked choice voting, the Fair Representation Act to your community, and redistricting reform if it doesn't already exist there. The best thing you can do is find out who's working on the ground right now, get connected to those groups and find ways that you can support them, whether it's offering yourself as a volunteer, donating to those groups, because many times they need funding too to make sure that they can get the word out and do the work, or helping to connect other people to the group and connect legislators if you're connected to other people who are within power structures, to make sure that this is on their radar and we're moving and advancing this forward. It can start at the local level and build and scale, and all of these reforms are scaling to make our democracy work for more and more of us, and that's what we need to keep doing.
Thank you. And Angela, please share.
Yeah, I would just say, first of all, like, show up. I mean, you guys showed up today, you showed up over this course of the summit. Like, democracy requires participation. You know, I echo what my panelists and my colleagues say. You know, as far as Congress goes, like, it is reflective of what's happening on the ground. It wants to, I mean, at its core, like, Congress is elected, you know, at least the House is every 2 years, and it is a, you know, popularity contest. And so they have to be in district and listen to their constituents. Nothing is more valuable than you reaching out to your member of Congress and developing that relationship with their staff, with their member. And to the extent that you're interested in educating and working, you know, with us, reach out with us at Fair Vote. We'll help you, prepare you to talk to your members of Congress and work with, you know, where our legislative strategies are. You know, just engage in your community, and, you know, be patient with Congress. It's been around for a long time. It takes a while to change.
All excellent tidbits. Thank you again to Cynthia and the incredible team at Represent Women, and of course to our experts here. Passing the mic on now. See you all later.
Thank all of you so much. And Katie, I love your story about Googling. That really resonates with me. I have definitely been there. Thank all of you, yes, again, so much for your perspective and your wisdom and your experience. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to wrap up our day with a take action panel with on-the-ground experts who are working rolling up their sleeves out there in communities and can tell us exactly what action steps we need to take to advance these solutions. We'll be back here in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Now we are joined by a panel of experts who are out there on the ground making things happen. And this panel discussion is moderated by Tiffany Gardner, CEO of the Reflect Us Coalition. And we will hear from Stephanie Houghton, Organizing Director of Fair Vote Washington, Jacqueline Castaneda, Deputy Communications Director of the DC Latino Caucus and Advisory Board member of More Voice DC, Jessica Lieberman, Program Officer for American Democracy, Political and Voting Reform at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, Sarah Higginbotham, Managing Director of Unite America, and last but not least, Maria Perez, Co-Director of Democracy Rising. Tiffany, I'm going to pass the mic to you and I'll let you take it from here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie. Good afternoon, everyone. What a stellar panel we have here. Ladies who are on the ground fighting the good fight, making things happen. So I'm just going to jump right into it because I know our audience wants to hear from you and all the good and exciting and creative work that's going on the ground. Maria, I'm going to start with you. Could you tell us a little bit about what Democracy Rising is doing on the ground in states to advance ranked choice voting and increase representation among voters?
Sure, thank you so much. And what a pleasure to be here with all these wonderful women on this panel and overall over the last 3 days. Democracy Rising, we are an organization that works directly with communities on the ground in places where people are either advocating for reform or where reform has already passed and it's time to implement. You can see my dog in the background there. Sorry about that. So what we do, particularly on the implementation side of things, right? We work in a lot of jurisdictions where ranked choice voting has already passed and is now being implemented. And what our goal is to ensure that implementation happens justly and that everybody is at the table, right? So that community at large is engaged, that people can get information about what is going on, what's going to be different about the upcoming election in language that is accessible to different communities, that is not, language that is not jargony or wonkety, where people can just understand what they're going to experience as a voter, and more importantly, even or equally as important, what the values are behind the change, right? So like, what is this new way of voting doing to highlight your values as a community member and your power as a voter? So that's what we do. We do a lot of voter education. We partner with community organizations on the ground where we're working that already have those long-standing relationships with their constituents, so that we're not helicoptering in and telling people what to do or how to do it. We partner with folks who already have those longstanding and meaningful relationships with different community constituencies. And then together we sort of figure out what's the best way to reach those constituencies. We support folks with issue area expertise, if you will, and the community partners on the ground, they figure out how to do the work, right? How to reach people, what's the best way to communicate with folks. They are the trusted messengers. So it's a partnership like that we do. And another thing that we do, most places that we work in, is educate candidates as well, right? Voters are going to be hearing from candidates about the election, particularly in the ranked choice voting election, where every vote is on the table. So voters often hear from multiple candidates in ranked choice voting elections when perhaps before that, nobody has ever gone to knock on their door, right? Mm-hmm. So making sure that candidates know what's happening, that they know what some best practices are in terms of running a campaign under this new method, and that they are giving voters correct information, and that they're engaging voters in a way that is going to empower the voters to go out and vote and express their preferences in a way that is authentic.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. And talk about on the ground change makers. I'm here in New York City, and this was our first election, our mayoral election, where we use ranked choice voting. So I can attest to the power of the work that you're doing there at Democracy Rising, both educating the voter, and there was a lot of work to educate us here in New York City, as well as the candidates. So thank you for that very strong work. Sarah, I'm going to go to you next. And please tell us about your role at Unite America and what Unite America is doing to advance multi-winner districts and ranked choice voting, and in particular, how you see investment in this work across the US taking shape in the next several years.
Thanks, Tiffany. Also good to see everyone's faces, and thrilled to hear from all of you today. So my role, I'm managing director at Unite America, and in that role, I oversee the operations of Unite America's venture style fund, which seeks to scale the democracy reform movement. And our mission at Unite America is pretty simple, but really important: representative and functional government. And so we focus on a set of issues: voting access, independent redistricting, primary reform, and ranked choice voting, some of which folks have been talking a lot about over the last few days. What that actually means is that I help oversee the allocation of grant dollars out to campaigns across the country, alongside the building, what we hope is thoughtful building of movement infrastructure. So filling gaps, making connections, fostering coordination. Mm-hmm. I also support our development team in building a community of cross-partisan philanthropists and helping those philanthropists and donors building out that community so people are actually investing into democracy. Mm-hmm. Understand the work and strategy ahead of us. I also help lead on sort of the strategic pieces around national state strategy, whether that's legislative, ballot measure, or we do a little bit of federal as well. And then finally, I also help oversee some of our actual boots on the ground via Unite America's state program, the Voters First Project. So we're embedded in 3 states right now, doing the full life cycle: electoral, legislative, ballot, everything there is to do all the way on the ground. And some of our electoral work. So that through my role, you can kind of get a sense for what Unite America does and the role that we play. Your second part, I'll try to be succinct here, was a great question, which is how does that sort of connect to what's ahead and the landscape? I mean, I'll just, I'm an organizer at heart. I've been a longtime issue advocate, and these issues matter so much to me because we can't seem to make progress on any of the other issues that I've cared for so long about if we don't make progress on systemic change. And so with my organizer hat on, and I'm newer to the movement, I've been at Unite America for just over a year. What stands out the most to me is that ranked choice voting in particular has, one, never had more momentum, and that we're at this incredibly compelling, I think, inflection point for the work around ranked choice voting and other structural reforms. And what's probably most compelling to me sort of strategically and politically is how much progress we've made across a broad range of states. So you heard from a Utah representative, you heard from one of the last purpley states, Maine, the Secretary of State there. We know about New York. So east, west, urban, rural, red, blue, the issue is advocates are demonstrating that the issue has political viability. And that's really, really important because what tends to happen on issues is a little bit of a domino effect. And so we just want to keep fueling all that momentum. And so that's a lot of what we think about at Unite America, which is how to tell that story of what's happening and how to keep strategically investing resources to just keep fueling momentum. Quickly, I'll just say we're winning on the ballot, 5 in the last year when it comes to RCV. We're winning in the legislatures. We're leveraging city wins to build proof of concept for bigger statewide wins. And we're even generating new opposition, which I just told my team yesterday, I think is a very good sign because it means you matter and it means they're paying attention. And there's more I could say, but I know there's other folks, so I'll step back.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sarah. And I love how you talk about the importance of scaling this work, right? And how really we're talking about a movement, I would call it, that really is touching all parts of the United States, and you really being very intentional about being part of that movement and how do you build and scale that movement. And then speaking about that in the national movement, I celebrated a birthday back in January, and one of my best friend, in fact, came over and we had cake and we had takeout and all this, and she gave me my birthday presents. And one happened to be the Our Common Purpose report. It just gives, I'm coming to you, and I said, oh wow, thank you. She also gave me some socks with some Bango socks, and I like the art as well. But I was super pleased with my Our Common Purpose report. So that was a great birthday gift for me, and I'm going through that once, twice, probably on the 4th time, underlining and highlighting it. So Jessica, if you could please tell us more about the Our Common Purpose report for those who may not be aware, and in particular, in light of that, the importance of ranked choice voting and multi-winner districts and the House expansion as we think about better representation for all Americans. Thank you.
Absolutely happy to be here. The Our Common Purpose report came out of our bipartisan commission on the practice of democratic citizenship, which Danielle Allen mentioned earlier. She was one of our co-chairs, and that commission included 35 members from academia, civil society, politics, business, and across the ideological spectrum. And they conducted nearly 50 listening sessions across the country, as well as looked at academic research and drew from their own expertise to come up with 6 strategies and 31 specific recommendations to revitalize American democracy. And those became the Our Common Purpose report. Among those recommendations are ranked choice voting in multi-member districts, which we've already heard a lot about today. The very first recommendation in the report was enlarging the House of Representatives, which was something that people weren't really talking about. And Our Common Purpose itself actually left a lot of questions open around it. So we issued a follow-on report last year, again, working with a bipartisan working group of scholars and former congressional staffers. And that was the case for enlarging the House of Representatives. And it basically makes the argument that this is something that used to be done. The House used to grow as the population grew. In 1929, we were capped at 435 members. There was no real principled reason for that number. It's just the size that the House happened to be at the time. And that's been really devastating for representative democracy. The average district size has exploded from 280,000 to 760,000 a day. And it's really hard to feel like you're well represented when you're literally 1 3/4 million. And so our report offers a concrete proposal for expansion, 150 seats, which is the number that has shifted from state to state since the cap was implemented. So right now we're in a situation where seats shift even when the state's population is growing. And in addition to improving the quality of representation, which is really important, this would also do a lot for bringing new voices into Congress. And sorry, I may have frozen there for a moment. But the important thing here is that by bringing 150 new seats into Congress, we would create a lot of opportunities to bring new faces and voices into Congress. as we have talked about earlier today, incumbency advantage is a huge barrier to electing more women and diverse voices to Congress. And so this would create 150 incumbent-free seats. It also would ensure that we're not losing progress going forward. And smaller districts are less expensive to run in. So direct mail, digital, TV, all of those are cheaper if you're reaching out to fewer people. So it empowers more people to run. And so my job at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences has been to do outreach, to educate on this issue, to make sure that people understand the benefits of this. It's, it seems like a no-brainer, some constitutional maintenance that's well overdue, and something we'd really like to see happen.
No, that's fantastic. And for those who haven't had a chance to pick up Our Common Purpose, I definitely encourage you to read it, because it was a very fine, in-depth job that was done. And Jessica, thank you for sharing with us the action that takes place after the report, right? The on the ground, how do you operationalize what's in the report? And speaking of that, Jacqueline, we would love to hear, and if you can fill us in on what's going on in DC and what has been your strategy for passing ranked choice voting in terms of unanimous support in the council. What is that looking like for you? And overall, how are things going?
Thank you, Tiffany. First of all, I'm really excited to be here to speak with all of you and to talk just about what it can look like, what implementing RCV could be. And just like Sarah, I'm pretty new. I think it's almost been a year since I started really advocating for ranked choice voting, and it's due because of me joining the DC Latino Caucus. The DC Latino Caucus has actually already supported ranked choice voting by the time that I joined, and we've been able to work with the true leaders in DC for ranked choice voting, Rank the Vote DC, Delicious Democracy, and many different individual community leaders who have already taken large steps towards implementing this in DC. We have been moving ground with ranked choice voting. It's a process, but we are looking at more supporters every single time we speak about it. Councilmember Henderson has been able to introduce the Voice Act, which will be a way of implementing and having a more educational campaign towards ranked choice voting, and to have it implemented by the 2024 elections. We were able to get a hearing and actually testify this past November, so that was really exciting. We had many supporters come through to testify and really express their views and their reasons, that it's not just an individual goal that they want for themselves, but it's a shared vision for all of DC to receive fair representation, fair ways to elect our candidates and our leaders who really will take on every single person's benefit and purpose to be able to be their representative. And that's been really exciting. With the DC Latino Caucus, we've really been working on the educational piece of it, because we do understand that when we're implementing something new, it can be very confusing, or it can be very challenging to really express what that is, particularly to communities who unfortunately have not really been part of the conversation. And that kind of goes into a more personal, I guess, aspect for myself and why I wanted to get involved more with this type of work. And it's because I grew up in DC, born and raised in DC, but my family are not originally from the United States. They came to DC late 80s, but eventually my mom particularly was able to get her citizenship, but not until 2008. So think about how many years, how many decades she has put into living in DC, contributing to DC, putting me into school, yet had no say or way of really speaking out of who she believes can represent her. And this is, and I believe that this still is a common issue that we see, and why it's important to find ways, especially for those who still experience certain barriers, because of laws, because of legal situations, that they cannot always be able to express who they want and who they can unfortunately elect who that they believe is a fair representative for themselves. And so we really are looking for a better way and for a more equitable way to ensure that all people, especially in DC and all communities, are getting that chance. And the RCV way just seems to be the actual, I don't even know if perfect way is the right way to say it, but if I, were to think of a better way to participate in our democracy, this is the way. So I think I might have answered the question. I will get in a tangent if you let me.
That was fabulous. That was fabulous, Jacqueline. I think, Jessica and Sarah, we talked about sort of that national view. And then, Jacqueline, you really gave us that local on the ground view. And my goodness, to be doing that work in DC for all the reasons that you mentioned and all the issues that is there in DC with respect to representation is pretty impactful. And you just gave me a new phrase that I'm going to coin, delicious democracy. I will be using that. Thank you very much. And Stephanie, so we talked about the national, we talked about the local. Let's get into this when it comes to the state level. Can you tell us what it's like to be working at the state level? And, in particular, we know every context is different, of course, but what things are you doing on the ground in Washington to advance ranked choice voting?
Sure, thank you. And thank you too for including Fairfield, Washington in this panel. I'm so happy to be here. So it's been quite a process. I too actually joined this movement just about a year ago, so I'm glad I'm not the only one. We are doing a couple different things at a couple of different levels with our kind of eye on the prize of implementing ranked choice voting in Washington state. So we're doing that in a couple of different ways. One of which is working at the county level, and another is working at the state legislature level. And they really help each other. They really feed into each other. And that's why I'm going to talk about both of them. So at the county level, we got ranked choice voting on the ballot. We're going to be voting on it in Clark County, Washington this November. So that was that's a really huge win for us. How did we do that? Well, it was through, we had an incredible volunteer leadership team down in Clark County, and we were able to support them with information and with that organizing structure. So phone banking, the charter amendment team, and making sure they knew that Clark County voters really wanted ranked choice voting, or at least the option to say whether or not they wanted ranked choice voting. And that was really, really helpful for when then the legislature was in session for only 60 days here in Washington, but we were able to kind of use that energy and that momentum to push us toward having those same kind of conversations with the legislators. So they really do help each other out. And the thing that I will say about the individual meetings that I have been having with state legislators is it can be a tough conversation. And I think anyone on this call who has tried to have a conversation with a legislator about ranked choice voting has probably come up against the same pushback, sort of. And it comes from a place, right, where they're in the back of their minds, they're thinking, well, oftentimes they are thinking, I'm a really great representative. I don't think I want to change the way that I got here. And that's true. That's true of representatives that I love and representatives that I don't disagree with. This is just I am putting their job up in front of them, right? And that's a really sensitive conversation. So, the unsolicited advice that I might give is just give space for that, right? And say this isn't, we're not suddenly not going to have democracy. It's still an election. It's just a way for your voters to actually tell you more about what they're feeling, right? To not just say, I want this one or I want this one and that's it, but to say, I really like you, this number one person. This other person was making some really good points. So I think that there is actually a place for our legislators, current and future, to learn more from ranked choice voting and to really take a lesson from that. And I found that to be a pretty effective message when I'm talking to legislators. Is this isn't to kick you out. You still get to run. It's still a democracy. We're not saying that nope, we're done with anybody who's here right now. We're saying this is actually good for voters. It's good for elected officials too. The last thing that I will say, and this is true for strangely almost everyone that I've talked to about ranked choice voting is everyone's very worried about everyone else being able to figure out how to use ranked choice voting, right? So I talk to volunteers who are worried about voters. I talk to, volunteers who are worried about each other. I talk to legislators who are like, well, I'm worried the voters won't understand. So our process in Washington is basically to put a ranked choice voting ballot in front of as many people as we can, and to work with folks like Maria at Democracy Rising to really like lean in and say like, this is how you do it and this is how it's going to work. And in the end, we have found that voters are not confused by the ballot, and that once you sort of present a ballot to a legislator and say, do you think that your voters are going to be confused by this? They sort of take a step back and say, oh, well, no, I don't think my voters won't be confused by that. So it's really just a matter of bringing them to the conversation, but you have to give them that space to understand where they are in that conversation now. And I think that's really true, definitely for folks at the state level. So thank you.
That was awesome, Stephanie. And I love, your commentary, about sort of meeting people where they are, right? And so knowing that with this, somewhat new approach and some of the natural hesitancy that can be there, but meeting people where they are, right? But then also the thought about, well, it's actually not that hard. And again, I'll say for New York City, our first time doing it in our mayoral race, we were concerned about that. But you're quite right that this isn't that hard. And so, articulating that as well and having folks like Maria who's on the ground to make sure that communities and people understand how to go about voting in this matter. So I want to go right into Q&A because we have quite a bit of questions from our audience members, some that they gave us when they registered, some that are coming through the chat and the Q&A now, and I want to make sure that we hear from them. So the first question, I just think it's fantastic, and it's a very sort of broad, sort of 60,000 foot view of this issue. If we are going to solve so many of the challenging issues, we need systemic reform to create a healthy, functioning government. So here's the question: how do we get the masses, right, to support the many other issues? How do we get the masses who support the many other issues to understand that systemic reforms are a means to their ends, right? So a lot of people come into these conversations with education, healthcare, whatever their personal concern is, right? So how do we get them to sort of see the forest through the trees, as it were, and understand that this systemic reform can indeed answer that narrow issue or that tree that they're focused on? And Marie, if you can start.
Sure. I mean, the way that I think of this question is I like to just flip the whole thing on its head, right? I don't think that it's our place or anybody's place to come into the sort of like this, a community or this conversation thinking like, how do we get the masses to do this or think that, right? I think that the approach, and it's slow and it's not as flashy as like a policy win, the approach really needs to be to build that democracy muscle in communities, right? So that we're not just working around getting people to vote or getting people to support a reform and like turn out to vote that year so that bill passes or whatever it may be. It is what happens between like November 5th and October, right? Like every year. So like, are we working year round? And this is really an issue about funding and resources, which are not there for this kind of work, right? But like, are we partnering with folks on the ground that are working with community members and constituencies that are diverse, that include different language communities, different age communities, different everything communities, urban, rural, red, blue, everything in between? Are we putting work in place, practices in place so that people can practice democracy, right? They can practice what it means to deliberate on issues, what it is to make sort of like collaborate and then compromise to come to a consensus, to talk through what are the community, specific communities' priorities, and talk about possible policy solutions, right? So like, I think that is where it's at. We need to become a country where everyday citizens and residents are practicing democracy every day. It's kind of like going to the gym. You can't ask people just to show up for election day and run a half marathon without training, right? We're training every week, every day. You put in your little whatever it is that your practices are. That is the way that we get the masses to whatever it is, right? It's that civic engagement on a long, sustainable, multi-generational terms.
Awesome. I love that practice democracy, both building that democracy muscle, but then also in the practicing us thinking about and grappling with and wrestling with ways to make the democracy stronger, right? Practice democracy. Sarah, I'm going to kick that question to you.
Oh, I like this one. And I'll just underscore +1 × 10 to everything Maria just shared, because I think very much so like the organizing muscle and the on the ground, that is from where I sit, which is different now than where I used to be in terms of like issue advocacy, but is this much more national seat, funder side, some programmatic, but so I'm further removed from that. But it is also my assessment that like that organizing muscle piece is obviously really important, and we need to do much more of it. My note is just on this, that, and we think about this a lot at Unite America and with partners, democracy is having a moment. And a lot of issue advocates spend a lot of their time trying to create a moment. And sometimes that's just how it is. And now democracy is having a moment every single day, not always for good reasons, most of them not good, on our TV screens, on the radio, in our media, around kitchen tables in a way that it hasn't ever, at least in my lifetime. And so one of the things we think a lot about is like, how do we meet that moment? And there's, while it's a headliner, RCV, for example, primary reform, the powerful combination of both, and other reforms, gerrymandering is much more in the lexicon, but the more structural, I think, like ranked choice voting is not. So how do we make ranked choice voting a top line talking point and take advantage of the moment and the year, which is one of our goals? And so I'll just say two things. One is, I think, I don't classify myself as a policy wonk. I love them, I need them, but that's not me. One, we need to keep pushing for sticky and simple messaging. Someone said it here today, and I'm not going to get it right, but easy to understand messaging. Because, and then two, that goes hand in hand with, we need to stop explaining. That doesn't mean we shouldn't stop teaching and coaching and all the other stuff on the ground, but in the big picture storytelling, we need to start connecting to how people feel. And I think it's easy with some of these wonkier like electoral reforms, all the jargon, it's just disconnected from a lot of the ways that we normally connect emotionally to issues. We need to start moving hearts and minds. And I used to knock on doors a long time ago and raise grassroots dollars. And we used to say, like, in that 30 seconds, you want to get someone's head nodding and their heart pumping. And so I think I sort of think about that moment in that way right now.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. That was awesome. Next question. What have been the most successful strategies for implementing the solutions you're working toward, right? What do you see this working, right? All of this in some ways is an experiment in democracy, an experiment in increasing greater representation. So what have been some of those strategies that feels like it's catching, right? Jacqueline, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Tiffany. I believe that in the case with the DC Latino Caucus and then just DC in general, we've been able to collaborate with many different groups, grassroots groups and coalitions, to have these, in some ways, challenging conversations about what will ranked choice voting look like and mean for in DC. And it is a challenge even today. DC is very unique. Many have said, we're already diverse. Why do we need another system to make us even more diverse? Like, it doesn't make sense. But again, it's not necessarily about bringing in more women or more people of color into something that hasn't allowed us. I'm very appreciative that DC has always been in a certain way open and not necessarily having barriers and that such. it's very inspiring. It's why I look up to some of the women on council, look up to some of the people who I can identify with in some ways in DC, which is why I'm doing this now. However, there are still some things that are not in ways that really help all of DC, all of the community, all of the diverse voices that we have here. And so we really want to be able to talk about how do we include not just those who really understand and have been part of the conversation for a long time, but those who haven't before. Those who, again, we have a large immigrant population in DC, and some of them may not be able to vote right now, but they can encourage the community and inspire the community to be able to elect those who really would be someone that can represent them. And in that case, we need something like ranked choice voting that can encourage that conversation, that encourage politicians and candidates to really seek all these different communities to get that vote. So yes, our immigrant population, if they're not eligible to vote in DC, will not be able to do so, but they still have the power in their voice to convince other people to say, hey, this is the politician I think that will really help us. This is the candidate that will really help us get this to represent us, to really speak for us, to stand for us. And we want to be able to work together to get that politician there. And that's how we've been kind of going. Education has really been a key part of that. We know that we have a lot of supporters for ranked choice voting in DC, but we still know that we have a lot of conversations to have with others who are still not on board with with thinking about how ranked choice voting will look like in DC. And that's okay. Conversations are a great way to start. Discussions are a great way to start. And I love teaching. I love learning as well. So I am ready for that fight. And with DC Latino Caucus, that's what we're doing. We really want to make sure we're in the ground with everyone else, following the lead, again, of all those organizations that had already started, following the lead of all the other states in our country that has already taken that step towards looking at what happened in New York, especially in New York recently, giving the right to non-citizens to be able to vote in their local elections. Like, that's just another step also. So we're looking at all these other places to say, this is something that we want to bring here too. How will we do it? And then implement it in our own way.
Awesome. That's great. I love it. Stephanie, same question for you. As you're working across the state, what strategies do you see that are gaining traction, that have been the most successful for you?
First of all, I loved every part of Jacqueline's answer. That was just amazing. Thank you so much. We are working closely. That was just incredible. We are working closely too with many partners throughout a variety of communities across the entire state, from Seattle to Spokane. And that's really it. It really is just like meeting people where they are, and also finding those trusted messengers to go to work with communities and say, like, okay, this is a really great way to talk about this within your community. And something else that we do talk about as well is, like, this might not be like everyone's most important issue, but it is the first issue, right? It's you have to do this one first, and we have to talk about how we're going to do this one first, because this will help us solve not all of the other issues, a lot of the other issues. The other part here in Washington that we've found to be effective is, although we are primarily working on local elections in counties, municipalities, and then moving up to, and then working with the state legislature, we've also just found it to be really effective to talk about the last two presidential races, right? And that in, like, the presidential primary in 2020 had about 1 million Democrats running for that nomination, and the one in 2016, same. And even if your candidate won, you were still aware that there were so many candidates. So we have found that to just be a really good way to invite more people to this conversation, because I'm an election nerd who knows who all of her city representation is, right? I know who they are. I make my job to know. I like to know. Most voters know who the president is, and that's a great in, right? The last two presidential primaries are a great, like, in for those conversations to get started and to say, nobody was running away with it. Nobody was, wiping the floor and saying like, I got my, 97% support coming out of Iowa. That person wasn't there. So like, let's talk. So how can we solve it? Well, this is how we can solve it. I have that you are seeing the solution. You are seeing the problem. We're all agreeing that wasn't working the best. I have this solution for you. And I found that to be a good strategy for taking folks who are in that city, like in that like really like deep level, and bringing it to the next level for them.
Thank you. That's fabulous. Looking at time here, and I want to make sure that we get all of our questions in, and really the one of the more interesting ones that I think that came across, and it's we've been talking about these different alternatives, right? In particular, ranked choice voting and the promise and the possibility, right, for moving toward a greater representation, right, and a greater democracy. At the same time, what are some of the common arguments that you've had to confront, that you had to grapple with this against ranked choice voting or other election innovations, right? Because we got to talk about that as well, right? And how have you addressed those, and how have you related to those? And Jessica, I'm going to ask you that one.
Well, I've been doing a lot of advocacy on education on enlarging the House. And the number one question that we get is, where is everybody going to sit? And so that's one that we've had as an objection. But sort of more seriously, I think one of the big things is that folks just don't necessarily think that it's possible to change, right? They see a lot of deadlock. They, they're not seeing the possibility of change. And the reality is that there's actually a lot of change happening. We see this with ranked choice voting. At the municipal level, it's been growing. At the state level, it's been growing. There have been wins. On enlarging the House, we point out that this is something that actually for 100 years happened regularly, and we managed it then. We can manage it again. And I think that the big challenge that we have is helping people see that change is actually possible, and it's in fact happening here, right now. And we just need to recognize it and continue to move forward.
Awesome, thank you. I think if the U.S. is nothing, it's innovative, right? And always evolving, always evolving. This isn't the same country it was in 1608 or 1755, or go on and go on and go on. And hence, Jessica, to your point, the being able to be nimble, to think about what works, what's commonsensical, and what's best for our democracy and for our nation. So as we're nearing the hour here, we got this dream team of panelists with us. I think we would be, remiss to not ask you all, what is your takeaway to the audience? What is one step, one action, one thought that you would like the audience to leave with, to act upon, to think more about? And I'll start with you, Sarah.
Mine's really simple and a little unlike me. But that's okay, because I know the others are going to have very actionable. I'm a little further away from specific campaigns, and they're going to have great expertise and good advice for you all. Mine is a little bit lighter, and that is to be an evangelist. And I'll have a specific action here, but throughout the coming months, start to connect the dysfunction that's being covered in the media, that's being talked about, directly to structural reform, and to try to do that in a non-wonky way. And so I always still to this day think, can I explain this to my mom? And my mom's really smart, but she can't keep up with all the different things I work on. So be an evangelist. My helpful takeaway action is, if you need some inspiration, United America does 3 things on Thursday, and we lift up 3 different thought pieces, news stories, or things that are currently happening to think about, and we contextualize them. And you can sign up for that update at uniteamerica.org. But get on social, talk to your representative, talk to your friends, talk on social media, and just sort of contextualize the moment and connect it to what matters most right now, which is trying to fix the system.
Awesome, thank you. Stephanie, I'll punt it to you. What is a takeaway, some takeaways you would like to leave with the audience members?
Sure. First things first, we do a Why Ranked Choice Voting Works seminar twice a month, and I would encourage everyone to hop on. You're going to learn about ranked choice voting, yes, and I feel like I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, but you're also going to learn some really cool ways to talk about ranked choice voting and also about the ranked choice voting community, specifically here in Washington. But I think it would be easily applied throughout whatever states you're all in. And then the last part that I'll say is part of this is to make it feel to everyone else as though this is inevitable. So I'm going to jump off what Sarah just said, and to really just like talk about ranked choice voting as though it is the solution. Like, this is the one we've been waiting for, y'all. Like, this is it. And to really, really push that message to your friends, family, your representatives, everyone, and always, because that's what's going to make it feel like this is a movement that we can really take advantage of. Thanks, Sharon. And thank you, Tiffany.
Awesome, Stephanie. Movement building. Jacqueline.
Sorry, I was taking notes so I can follow up with them afterwards. Let's see. I think I take a lot of what I've learned and try to recycle it back out to everyone else because I'm still involved as a newbie. I like to say, I know it's been almost a year, but I am still learning every day. I'm still learning how to be able to communicate to other people, especially here in DC with my other community members, you know, particularly in the Latino population here in DC. What does it mean and why is this important for us? And so, you know, it's not always easy, but it's, I guess, a passion that really motivates all of us to do that because we do have a shared common goal for a lot of us here in DC. And as long as we keep that going, as long as we have those tough conversations, and as long as we challenge ourselves all the time to be able to continue that, you know, we will always be in somewhat the same page. We may not always agree on a lot of views, but if we all believe that we have the right to more equitable democracies, particularly for our community members here who never really have a chance to express how they feel, what they need, or what they believe in, then it's our duty to do that, especially for those who do have the right to do that. That's something that I also took in consideration, that, you know, my family may not be able to contribute their vote to something, but that's why I'm here also. And it's also my duty and everyone else's as well that I encourage to learn how to be able to communicate with communities that may have those certain barriers. So I do want to do a little plug that if you visit the DC Latino Caucus website, you'll see our recent panel event that includes Maria over here from Democracy Rising. So it's a really great conversation about how to include populations, communities that are non-English speakers on how to be able to communicate and educate ranked choice voting to them. And that's another step as well. We want to bring everyone in, and that includes people who may or may not understand it, but we'll get them there somehow.
Fantastic. Jessica?
Thank you. I'm gonna, in a lot of ways, sort of piggyback on what folks have said so far. You know, I do think that one of the really important things to do here is to spread the word that this is possible. All of these ideas are really feasible. You know, the number one thing I hear when I talk about enlarging the House is, you know, I didn't know we could do that, right? But we can, and it's not that hard, right? So making sure that we're getting the word out about these ideas and their benefits, I think is really important. Share the report, our common purpose report and enlarging the House.
I think you muted yourself, Jessica.
I'm trying to put the reports into the chat. Would love for folks to read those, share those, and you know, really help get the word out about these really important reforms.
And I'll just add, they make a perfect birthday gift. And Mother's Day is right around the corner as well. And we put it in the chat. Awesome. Thank you, Katie. And we have it in the chat there. So, and last and certainly not least, Maria, a takeaway for the audience. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I know we're at time, so I'm going to keep it really brief. I want to bring it back to what Danielle Allen said at the opening of this day today, which is what is fair representation, right? What does equitable representation mean? And it just means that our elected representatives are doing everything they can to make everybody's lives easier, right? Like allow for everybody to get an opportunity to thrive. So having said that, I'm going to push back to what some of my colleagues have said here. I love ranked choice voting. I think ranked choice voting is wonderful, but I know that we get in our little bubble of the reform that we really care about, and then we silo ourselves from other folks who are, we have to keep our eye on the prize, is my takeaway. The prize is a healthy democracy, a healthy representative democracy. So whether you love ranked choice voting, democracy vouchers, 16-year-old voter registration, or if you even work out from the actual like democracy reform space, if you care about fair housing, if you care about economic opportunity, all of these things, we are all adding our little drops in the bucket that are going to take us to our goal, which is the prize of an equitable democracy. So my what I would like to ask everybody who is here today is, whatever your issue is, hold it close to your heart, work hard for it, but talk to folks who are working on other stuff, right? And understand how those dots connect. How does fair housing connect with ranked choice voting? How do democracy vouchers connect to economic opportunity, right? We all need to understand that we're working towards the same goal, and understand, super importantly, that if my issue wins today, that advances your issue as well. And if your issue wins today, that advances my issue, and we can win later. So let's de-silo our space and keep our eyes on the prize.
Wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think those were amazing words to end on. Not much to say there. The chat is lighting up with thank yous and gratitudes. This was amazing having this conversation with you ladies. Please keep up the good fight. Those who want to join, who are a part of the fight, thank you. Those who want to join the fight, there will, I'm sure, be contact information for each of our panelists. It was an honor to be with you ladies this afternoon, and thank you for the work you're doing. I know it's not always easy, so I'll say thank you for the work that can oftentimes be hard that you're doing on behalf of our democracy. Thank you.
Thank all of you so much. After having the privilege of listening to an astonishing total of 41 women experts over the course of these past 3 days, this Solution Summit has taught me that these issues are urgent and they are important, and that there are solutions. There are solutions. There are real transformative and scalable solutions that we know work. And there are experts out there who can guide us along the way. What a hopeful and encouraging message that is. So if you are feeling energized to take what you've learned and be a part of the solution, we are not going to leave you hanging. Represent Women has compiled all of the Take Action resources that have been shared throughout the summit, and they are waiting there for you on the Solution Summit website, which I think someone on our team will pop in the chat for anyone who's still with us. Please do keep in touch and stay up to date on the latest in representation and structural solutions by following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Represent Women, and also signing up for our newsletter at representwomen.org. Thank you so much again for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed your time here, and we really look forward to welcoming you back to Represent Women events in the future. Enjoy the rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everybody.